Go. Come here, doctor.
Man, I gotta go. I'm working,
Doctor.
I'm working.
Doctor, this is the mayor talking.
All right.
Doctor,
Come on, what?
always do the right thing.
That's it?
That's it.
I got it. I'm gone.
Do the Right Thing was released in 1989 to critical and commercial success. It's directed, written, produced, and even stars Spike Lee. Yes, he does all of that. And although you might think someone being stretched this far would show in the quality of the film, it does not. Lee managed to create a truly vibrant rendition of New York that reminds me of films like West Side Story, but we'll come back to that comparison later. The film is rife with conflict throughout. However, just like the real world, there is also love, compassion, and comedy flowing out of the residents of the Brooklyn neighborhood that the film takes place in. If I had to summarize the film in a sentence, it really does remind me of a quote from a very unlikely place: Romeo and Juliet. While this may seem like a strange place and even a pointless comparison, my brain sadly remembers more about GCSE English than I'd like to admit. This quote comes from Benvolio in Act 3 Scene 1. For now, in these hot days is the mad blood stirring. This use of pathetic fallacy, or to put it more simply, the weather reflecting the mood of the story and characters, is prevalent throughout the entirety of the film, and perfectly encapsulates the growing conflict and rage seen between the African Americans and the Italians in Brooklyn. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'd like to start by talking about I think what came as the biggest surprise to me when watching Do the Right Thing was how amazing the camera work was. Most notably to me was the effortless switch from a medium-wide handheld shot into a POV shot. I'll be playing the clip now so you can have a look for yourself, but this shot manages to be efficient and stylish while throwing the audience directly into the perspective of the main character in just one take. Now, maybe I'm being a bit of a caveman about this, but I just think it surprised me in the best way possible. Another technique I saw employed fairly often was the classic Dutch tilt. Now, the Dutch tilt originated from the German Expressionist movement in the 1920s and the 1930s, although now it's common to see it in almost all forms of films and TV. I think even The Amazing Spider-Man 2 uses it at one point. But don't worry, we are not here to talk about that film. Dutch tilts are commonly used to show that things aren't right. It can add a sense of tension or uneasiness, which works perfectly in the context of Do the Right Thing, with the constant yelling, fighting, and simmering conflict all the way through. Now, equally as important as camera is sound, and Do the Right Thing features a soundtrack largely consistent of hip-hop of the time. Most significantly is Public Enemy's Fight the Power, which is featured in full in the amazing opening dance done by Rosie Perez. As well as consistently being blasted from Radio Raheem's boombox. And for good reason. The song reached number 20 on the R&B and hip-hop charts of the year. The reason this song is so frequently used is fairly obvious, and complements the themes of conflict and oppression nicely, while also just being a good song that I recommend anyone who hasn't listened to go and check out after you like this video. Maybe more interestingly, of course, is the original soundtrack of music for the film, which was composed and partially performed by jazz musician Bill Lee, who's actually the father to the director, writer, producer, and actor Spike Lee, which is actually something I found out doing the research for this video. The soundtrack was released in late June of 1989 and found relative success, reaching the number 11 spot on the top R&B and hip-hop albums chart. Now we're on to the meat of this video, the story. And like I said, it reminded me of the original West Side Story. Of course, this isn't the most accurate comparison, but it also isn't irrelevant. Both stories take place within Brooklyn and focus on the conflict between three main groups. In West Side Story, it's the conflict between the Jets, the Sharks, and the police. And in Do the Right Thing, the conflict is instead between the Italians, the black residents, and the police. Now, it's important to mention that Do the Right Thing has much more of a focus on reflecting the real world, where West Side Story sometimes romanticizes it. Lee has been asked what the inspiration for the film was, to which he says he took inspiration from watching the Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode Shopping for Death, with one of the main characters having the argument that hot weather increases violent tendencies. However, even more importantly, Lee has cited two real-life tragedies as playing a part in the inspiration for the story. The Howard Beach racial incident, as it's called on Wikipedia, and the shooting of Eleanor Bumpers. And these are both real cases of real police injustice and unnecessary death, which is a clear theme in the story. I've left links in the description of the Wikipedia pages for these incidents if you'd like to do some research for yourself. The story has multiple overlapping narratives, with the main narrative focusing on Spike Lee's character, Mookie, as he delivers pizza across the neighbourhood. However, with there being loads of characters, there's also lots of little side plots, and my favourite revolves around the character Demea, who's played by Ozzie Davis. As far as I could see, Do the Right Thing was probably his biggest acting credit, aside from a few TV shows here and there. We follow Demea's life as he turns from a bumbling alcoholic.
Mother, sister, you've been talking about me for 18 years. What have I ever done to you?
You a drunk fool.
Besides that, the mayor don't bother nobody, and nobody don't bother the mayor.
Into a pretty fearless and insightful character, all while trying to get to speaking terms with his neighbour, mother-sister, who is actually played by his real-life Ruby Dee. Overall, Demea has a pretty simple but fulfilling storyline. That's probably why he's my favourite. The other main narrative follows the Italian family in their restaurant where Mookie works. The father is played by Danny Eleo, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, although the role of Sal was initially offered to Robert De Niro, who turned it down due to scheduling issues. His two sons are played by John Turturro, who I'm sure you know from many films like Brother Where Art Thou, and most importantly, the Transformers series. I'm not really sure why he decided to do those films, but I'm happy he did. His other son is played by Richard Edson, who's also been in many acclaimed films like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Stranger Than Paradise, and Eyes of an Angel. Together, the three actors create a very compelling and grounded family dynamic. Danny Aeo gives off an air of tough parental affection to the entire neighbourhood whilst remaining a tired and worn down man. His eldest son Pino, played by John Turturro, is presented as a pretty conflicted character who projects his frustrations with himself and the world through his racism. This is even proven when Mookie confronts him on his racist views by asking him who his favourite celebrities are.
Pino, who's your favorite basketball player?
Magic Johnson.
Who's your favorite movie star?
Eddie Murphy.
Who's your favorite rock star? Prince.
It's clear he doesn't have any reason for his sudden racism, not that there ever is one, but the scene with his dad's heart-to-heart is really one of the best scenes in the film.
I sat in this one day. I watched these little kids get old. And I seen the old people get older. Yeah, sure, some of them don't like us, but most of them do. I mean, for Christ's sake, Pino, they grew up on my food. On my food. And I'm very proud of that.
And finally, the youngest brother, Vito, played by Richard Edson, who I think represents a lot of younger brothers out there. Luckily, he's quite the opposite to his older brother, being more calm and collected, and more importantly, not racist. I'd argue he sort of has his own little character arc, sticking up for his beliefs despite his brother's brotherly abuse.
Listen to what I say. I'll rip you. I'll fuck you up. You know I'll fuck you up. You know something, Pino? What? You don't know everything you think you know, man. You think you know it, but you don't know it, man. Mookie, he listens to me, you know, man. He does, man. You fucking don't. You fucking stab me in the back, man.
Overall, the dynamic in the relationship between all three of them creates a group that some may like and some may not. I think that's the point. Lee isn't trying to force any side of the conflict into the audience's face. It's not for him to do. It's for the audience to decide what they think is right or wrong. Which brings me on to the final and saddest plot, which revolves around Radio Raheem. After being kicked out earlier in the film, Bugging later goes to recruit Radio Raheem to go with him to storm into Sal's Pizza and demand change once again. However, due to an accumulation of the hot weather and the growing discourse in the neighbourhood, Sal breaks Radio Raheem's boombox, which ultimately leads to the climax of the film, where Sal and Radio Raheem tumble out of his restaurant and fight on the street. However, with the film being an accurate depiction of New York in the 80s, things don't go well. The police show up, ultimately choking out Radio Raheem until he dies. It's a sad but familiar scene, yet again showing how the film chooses to reflect the real world. People from the crowd yell and scream in protest of Radio Raheem slowly dying. Even the other officer tells him to stop. However, nothing changes. Radio Raheem dies. After the police leave, either out of anger or sadness, or a mixture of both, Mookie breaks the window to Sal's Pizzeria. Shortly after, the angry crowd follow in and ultimately burn Sal's Pizzeria to the ground, With the fire raging on, Smiley goes inside and finally puts up a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, creating the beautiful image of the picture being surrounded by flames. Two men showing two forms of protest, one of violence and one of peace. In classic Spike Lee fashion, which is partly why I love the film, it's up to the audience to determine what they think is right. The next day, Mookie returns to the burnt down Sal's Pizza and finds Sal outside. After a bit of discourse,
You didn't get over from the fucking insurance anyway, Sal. You know the deal.
What the fuck is wrong with you? This ain't about money. I could give a fuck about money. You see this fucking place? I built this fucking place with my bare fucking hands. Every light socket, every piece of tile, me with these fucking hands. You know what the fuck that means?
Yeah, it means pay me my motherfucking money. That's what it means, Sal.
Okay. How much do I owe you?
My salary is $250. $250 a week.
Sal pays him his money. They talk about how hot the day was, and they continue on with their lives.
Keep it.
You keep it.
You keep it.
You keep
No,
it.
you keep it.
You keep it.
I don't believe this shit.
Believe it.
Are you sick?
I'm high as a motherfucker. I'm all right, though.
The film's real ending finishes with two quotes, one from Martin Luther King and one from Malcolm X. The film doesn't give you an answer about whether what happened was right. There isn't really any hand-holding. You're thrown into the story, you meet the characters as you go, and you get your own interpretation from it. Whereas nowadays you see films trying to tell you what you should think and tell you how you should feel. But this film leaves you with a bittersweet taste in your mouth.
Now, the news and weather. Our mayor has commissioned a blue ribbon panel, and I quote, to get to the bottom of last night's disturbance. The city of New York will not let property be destroyed by anyone, end quote. His Honor plans to visit our block today. Maybe he should hook up with our own, the mayor, buy him a beer. Your love daddy says, register to vote. The election is coming up. There's no end in sight from this heat wave, so today, the cash money word is chill. That's right, C-H-I-L-L. When you hear chill, call in at 555-LOVE and you'll win cash money, honey. This is Mr. Senior Love Daddy coming at you from what's last on your dial, but first in your hearts, and that's the quintessential truth, Ruth.
For the final part of the video, I'll talk a bit about the production. As I said, Lee got the inspiration from the Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode, Shopping for Death, as well as the two real-life events around Eleanor Bumpurs and the Howard Beach incident. After speaking to Robert De Niro about the Howard Beach incident, it took Lee only 2 weeks to write the entire script for the film. The original ending of the film had a much clearer resolve between Sal and Mookie. However, the ending was changed to the more vague ending we now have, which I think works in the film's favour. The film began shooting on July 18, 1988 in a dilapidated Brooklyn neighbourhood. Some structures for the film, such as the Korean store and Sal's Pizza Place, were built for the film, but a large majority of the flats were former crack dens, so that's cool. But something I think is pretty cool is the fact that Lee actually organised a block party before filming to foster a positive relationship with the neighbourhood, which I can't say I've heard anyone else do before. The production designer Win Thomas used a lot of red and orange paint for the streets to give the sense of a heatwave. However, local dealers threatened the crew for disturbing their business, which led to Lee hiring the Fruits of Islam to provide security. I've never heard of them before, but do your research. They are a very fascinating group. I'll leave a link in the description. One final little piece of information I found out about the production was that Lee allowed Bugging Out and Sal to improvise their racist remarks in their final confrontation. With Giancarlo being of African American and Italian descent, he found the scene very cathartic. But that's about all I have time for in my very first YouTube video. This last part of the video is going to be a bit unscripted, so forgive me if I make any mistakes. I wanted to make this video just for fun. I've just got a camera, I'm trying to get into using it a bit more, and I aim to make more videos for whoever wants to watch them. This is sort of for a portfolio thing, but you know, I think I enjoy it and we'll see how I do with it. Yeah. Sounds about right. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe. You know the drill, I don't need to tell you. Share the video, I guess, if you liked it. Don't know if that will be embarrassing or anything. But yeah, this took me longer than it should have. This is the biggest thing I have to say. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in 10 years when I upload my next video.